I'm Thomas Smith, Wyla Dean and Bill Saxon, Director of the Art Museum. And I'd like to say to you, good evening, good afternoon. I always find 5 o'clock to be a very curious time because is it afternoon? Is it evening? Never quite sure. But whatever it is, it's nice to have you here. It's a pleasure that you're here with us this evening. I guess evening is probably the more appropriate. I'm going to just say a few words and really welcome you. And I'm ultimately going to hand it off to Alan Levinson and to our speaker. But I wanted to take just a moment and welcome everyone, but also to get a chance to publicly say thank you to Alan Levinson and his colleagues at the Schusterman Center for what has been just a wonderful partnership. Alan, I think, sent me an email not long after I had arrived at the university. This email popped up out of the blue and wanted to talk to me about a partnership. And we met together with some of our staff, and it really has been a wonderful partnership. And admittedly, the Schusterman Center has done most all of the heavy lifting, admittedly, and we're very grateful to them for what was a superb idea for a presidential dream course. And I think Alan had all this great plan and had it all worked out to present this topic as possibly being funded as a presidential dream course. And all we had to do was say yes, but which we gladly did. And has been a wonderful partnership, and we're very grateful for their collegiality. This is I believe, the third session of 4 public lectures that are part of the Presidential Dream Course. And we're very much looking forward to this lecture by Samantha Baskind. And I'm very happy to have all of you here. Welcome from the museum, and from the museum to Alan and his colleagues at the Schusterman Center. We really appreciate your partnership. And without further ado, I'll hand it to Alan.
Before I introduce Professor Baskind, I just want to have say one more enormous thanks to my co-teacher, Yael Lavender Smith, who's right. Yael, have a wave. Not everyone knows you. And it's just been wonderful to work with Yael every step of the way. Professor Samantha Baskind is the Distinguished Professor of Art History at Cleveland State University. As a matter of fact, she is the first distinguished professor at Cleveland State University in any discipline. Her most recent works include The Warsaw Ghetto in American Art and Culture. She co-edited the Jewish graphic novel, Critical Approaches. Professor Baskind has published over 100 articles and reviews, mainly on American Jewish art, but not only. She's served as the editor of the American art section in the revised edition of Encyclopedia Judaica, and is currently the series editor for Dimyonot, Jews and Cultural Imagination, published by Penn State University. She writes frequently for the Smithsonian and for other well-known journals that ordinary humans read, not just academics. And she is, as our students discovered this morning, what I already knew, frankly, through the Cleveland grapevine, that she is a superlative classroom teacher, witty and engaging. And without further ado, let me introduce Professor Samantha Baskind.
Thank you for the introduction, Alan and Yael, for bringing me here. And museum, it's a pleasure. I always love talking about Archie Rand, the Bible, art, really anything. So today we're going to talk about Archie Rand, When Comics Meet the Bible, which is, sometimes surprising to people that comics meet the Bible. But in this case, Archie Rand is the foremost artist, the Jewish American artist at this particular time. He's been making art for decades. He's in his 70s. He has works in, say, the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Victoria and Albert. And he is incredibly impressed by scale. And we're going to see that today, how impressed he is by scale. He made 60 paintings. We're going to talk about, in particular, not advancing, hold on. We'll do it that way. All right, he made a series called 60 Paintings from the Bible. It's from 1992. So these are 60 paintings. They're all 18 by 24 inches, and they're acrylic and marker on canvas. So when you think about 18 by 24 inches, that's not big, right? You know, this is misleading how big it is on the screen right now. So they're, you know, think about an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So there are 60 of them. They address the Hebrew Bible and the Apocrypha. He is not interested in the Christian Bible. So this is the first in the series. It's Adam. It's from 1992. And just to get you sort of situated, this is from you might recognize this from, say, the Sistine Chapel. Like, this is a moment from the Garden of Eden. Eve picks the apple. They realize suddenly that they do not have clothes on. So the Bible goes into lots of different thereofs and where so, and, you know, all of this language. But Archie likes to pare it down to the essentials. We're naked. And it's using very, you know, typical comic book, you know, capital letters and triple underlining and exclamation points. He inhabits the Bible with his comic mode. This is the first of many series that use a comic book style. So it's the first, again, 1992. He's been using a comic book style in various ways ever since. All right, so here we have, it's kind of painterly, meaning we get a sense of the artist's hand here. He uses Technicolor. He's using comic book color, not just comic book language with speech bubbles and pointers. The pointer is the element that, you know, comes from the figure's mouth. So here we have, you know, a scene that is filled with color. It's very clear in its intentions. And if we compare it to a typical Fall of Man scene, this is a Titian, a Italian Renaissance artist. So here we have classically rendered nude figures. Eve is getting the apple and Adam is looking at her. Their genitalia is covered. And that's very common for the period. Archie is much more overt about it, right? We see a clear genitalia outlined in green. These are his words, this is what it is, right? Let's not confuse ourselves with biblical vernacular. Let's not confuse ourselves with classicism necessarily, even though he very much respects all of this older art. Let's just lay it down to its essentials. So that's his overall mode. And he uses comics to do that, in part because he loves comics. He considers himself sort of a Jewish wise guy who in comics can inhabit the mode in which he wants to paint. He feels this way because Jews really built the comics industry from the ground up. For those of you who don't know, Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel invented Superman, and that was in Cleveland, where I live. It's actually a few miles from where I live. There's a wonderful house like this that you can go and you can visit and see, you know, this is where there's a big S on the front of the house for Superman, but it's not a museum. People live in it. And they don't want to sell it to the city, but it's just a Superman house. People go and they ogle at it, and the people that live there just say hi. They sit on their porch. So he felt like, so not only did Jews start Superman, the first superhero, but like Fantastic Four was conceived by Stanley Lee, better known as Stanley Lieber, Captain America by Jacob Kirby, and Joe Simon, and Jacob Kirby was Jack Kirby was Jacob Kurtzberg, and so forth. So Archie feels like this is his style, and he has a precedent for it. Here we have the expulsion from Eden, and Archie has his two figures, Adam and Eve. They're in, you know, deep red color. We don't have a sense of their faces or in particular, but coming from the sky, man must be stopped from touching the tree of life or he'll live forever. underlined, exclamation points, compared to Masaccio's expulsion. And Masaccio is an early Italian Renaissance artist. And I mean, this is a really important piece in general. It imbues Adam and Eve with personality, right? Like we can actually see their agony at what they have done. Even we have some shadowing. These are all new inventions. But in Archie, you can see his shadowing, but it's like pink blotches of paint because he's a modernist. He doesn't feel like he needs to convey naturalism as we know it from a long time ago. So, but in this case, Adam and Eve's shame for what they've done is conveyed just through color, right? Through the color red. And Archie does that a lot. He uses color and expressionism to convey what he's trying to say versus naturalism and, facial expression. We have that here. We have, the voice of God you can see from the pointer. The pointer always tells us where the words are coming from in both comic books and graphic novels, as well as Archie's work. So as I've indicated, color is really important to him. Color is what helps him convey what he's trying to say. This is how comics meet the Bible. And in this case, we have King David on the left, and we have Jephthah's daughter on the right. David was king of the Israelites, and he wins a major battle. He's brought many riches. That's what we're seeing here. And look at him with his beautiful purple coat with like a little bit of like little touches of paint, give a sense of like the jewels or the brocade on it. And he's dedicating all of this booty to God. Booty. We don't have the word booty in the Bible. But then in comparison, Jephthah's daughter, which is a very different, everyone might know King David. They might not know Jephthah or Jephthah's daughter. It's a really problematic story. In the Bible, Jephthah is going to war and he inexplicably tells God, if I win, I will sacrifice the first person I see after my victory. And it's his daughter. So we can see his speech bubble. Oh no, it's my daughter. Now, this is obviously a really disturbing story, and Archie has chosen to show it instead in muted tones with just yellow swaths on either side, showing the two groups of people, and even like, a barely colored canvas, just very like a sense of the outlines of the environment. So again, he's using color to convey what he's trying to say, along with the paring down of the words. And look at that, my daughter. It gets the largest lettering. And of course, it's underlined as we do in comics when we're trying to say something in a big way. It's like shouty capitals. So Jephthah's daughter makes us, of course, think, I hope, of the sacrifice of Isaac. So the sacrifice of Isaac, another problematic story. Archie uses the title, The Sacrifice of Isaac, which is used sometimes, but it's also called the binding of Isaac, because Isaac is not in fact sacrificed. So the binding of Isaac, or the Akedah, depending on your tradition. And in this case, we have Abraham with his son Isaac on the altar. And we can also see, I believe in the power of looking. You look longer, you see more, but maybe now you see an angel up in the corner, kind of, fading in the background. And as the story goes, Abraham, he's sacrificing Isaac he's been commanded to, but he's kind of having like belief in God. Maybe God's not going to make him actually do this. The angel comes down, there's a ram that is in the story, and an angel comes and gets him to stop. But that's not what Archie's really showing here. Archie finds this story to be absurd. And as such, Abraham says, I'm here. Like, come on, I'm here. This is my son. This isn't what I want. But in the Bible, it's here am I. So it's a play on the words of the Bible, Hanini. And in that way, Archie's, having his own kind of interpretation of how he views these biblical stories. And he is Jewish, and he is very, he loves Judaism. His kids went to day school, but he still feels like he wants to make some commentary on some problematic aspects of the Bible. And just to give you comparative material, and since you're going to be hearing about Rembrandt when Professor Nadler comes, this is a Rembrandt Sacrifice of Isaac, which is just a phenomenal painting. Really, everything Rembrandt does is phenomenal. He's my lifelong crush. I'm going to Amsterdam in a couple of weeks to go spend my 50th birthday present was ruined by COVID. So my 53rd birthday present is spending a week with Rembrandt in Amsterdam. And so here we have a traditional sacrifice of Isaac. We have Abraham. It's almost like he's strangling his son, like pulling his son's face down. The angel's coming. She's stopping this with this horrible act. The knife, is falling from Abraham's hand. It almost looks like it's going to hit Isaac anyway. But this is a traditional sacrifice of Isaac. But again, this is not what Archie's interested in. So now we have a sense of how the Bible's been shown before, and we can see how the Bible is shown in a late 20th century idiom. We've now looked at a couple images that are recognizable to us for the most part. Genesis is recognizable. Most people, recognize Exodus. But let's look at Jeremiah and Elijah for examples of how Archie appropriates modern speech to tell the story. So modern speech suggests not only the very humanness of the biblical figures, but also in some cases a more human God, a God that has vexations towards his earthly followers rather than just like this omniscient presence. And in Jeremiah, here on the left, the prophet sort of expresses his hesitancy to go forth as a prophet. And in the Holy Scriptures, and I have a couple like Holy Scripture words so you can see how different they are. In the Holy Scriptures, God responds to Jeremiah's reluctance. So this is the Bible from Jeremiah. Say not, I am a child, for to whomsoever I shall send thee, thou shalt go. And whatsoever I shall command thee, thou shalt speak. So again, in Jeremiah, God adds that he will be there with his appointed prophet. He says, be not afraid of them, for I am with thee to deliver thee. Okay, so Archie deviates from the biblical account in both word and image. So we see this bright yellow, it's very bright yellow sun in a cloaked Jeremiah. It's against a Mediterranean landscape. But Archie's God does not soften his words, as in that biblical original. So this 20th century God, remember this is from 1992, he's frustrated. He's like a chastising parent. And I can never see it up there. It's too small for me. But what it says is, don't tell me that you are a child, because you are going to go wherever I send you and repeat whatever I tell you to say, exclamation point, double exclamation point. So in Elijah, we have like a like-minded angle here. So Elijah's acting as God's emissary. He's a prophet from the book of Kings. And he tries to convince the Phoenician idolaters to worship his God. So the idolaters don't obey. Elijah becomes overzealous and he kills some of them. He feels bad. He's upset he didn't stem idol worship. He shouldn't have killed anybody. He's running for his life from the Phoenicians. He lies on the ground. He refuses food. So then we have Archie's interpretation of this biblical story. Very thick, deep hues of paint here. There's like little dabs of paint throughout. And an angel commands Elijah, get up and eat. That's it. Get up and eat. In the biblical passage, it's from Kings. It says, arise and eat, because thy journey is too great for thee. But Archie doesn't see it that way. Just get up and eat. Come on. That's how he thinks God is probably thinking. So we have everyday vernacular and humor in these images, as you can see. We have Ezekiel, we have Tobit as well. Tobit is from the Apocrypha. So by the Apocrypha, I mean works that are not part of the biblical canon, like we don't believe they're from divine inspiration. So in Ezekiel, we have an irate God, shocker, right? God vows to destroy the land and its people with pestilence and famine, basically for their wicked ways if they don't obey his laws. Again, richly impastoed canvas, lots of color. And because they're smaller than you think here, like the color really pops way more than you can see it. But he Archie loosely paraphrases the biblical passage. essentially Archie's God like declares his instructions from heaven as if he's a member of the mafia. So it says, I can never see this completely on a screen. So basically, I'm God, exclamation point underlined. I'll speak and whatever I say will happen, exclamation point, and happen fast. And then he says, wise guy, do this, wise guy he uses, or poof, you'll be history. So this humor is a big part of Archie's work. On the right, we have Tobit, another, Tobit's not a very well-known figure either, but in the Bible, there are sparrows. Up here, they relieve themselves into his eyes. He's blind. But in Archie's version, Tobit screams, oh my gosh, I have cataracts. Now, Archie's interested in humor because his childhood was infused with humor. He wanted to be a stand-up comedian. He would memorize bits from the Ed Sullivan Show and do them, and he would give them when he was at school. He's a character. He is really a character. He still is very funny, and he can, Borscht Belt comedy, and you name it. He can quote it. He can toss it out in a conversation. It's sort of like your head is spinning when you talk to him, and your head is spinning when you go to his studio because the man paints. He paints fast. He paints like 60 paintings in 1 year. Actually, it wasn't even 1 year it took him. But, he just paints fast. We can see that on how the paint is laid down on his canvases. So where does he get all these compositions from? Are they from his head? They're not, we have no precedent for them that we know of, except on the left, we have his Solomon. On the right, we have a Matthias Marian. So Matthias Marian was a 17th century Swiss-born engraver. And he afforded Archie a starting point. Archie, as I mentioned, is impressed by scale. He found a book of reproductions of all of Marian's prints. And so he finds this book. It's just like, like a 20th century, this is Matthias Marian's work. Archie starts exploring it more. I mean, there's hundreds of them, Hebrew Bible, Christian Bible, across the board. And he sees that there's lots of illustrated Bibles over time made from these plates. And he decides that he wants to just sketch them. So he sketches them. He ends up copying them on these small canvases. And he feels like they're kind of kitsch. Like, what can he, he's just copying them. What more can he do? And that's when he decides to turn this into a comic book extravaganza. You can see the original versus how he transforms them. And part of that transformation, besides turning them into comic books and using speech bubbles, is the loud colors that, as I've said, are very much comic book influenced, but also we have to look at some art, like some more, fine art, which is a problematic term. And anyway, why aren't comic books considered fine art? Why are they just popular culture? But Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, this is Self-Portrait with Model from around 1910. German Expressionist color and the German Expressionist brushstroke is also a formative influence for him in this series and others. So Archie, too, in an effort to show us kind of the silliness of some of the Bible, this is Passover, and we can see the original Matthias Marian on your right and the Archie here on the left. And I know you can't really see the text because of the light here, but what it's saying is it's making fun of all of the rules that Jews have to follow for Passover. You can't eat this, you need to do this, you got to get rid of a bunch of crumbs. Like, there's just so many rules. And here, eat the lamb tells you all these rules, and he's playing with it. The canvas is not, it's interesting. We can see this, Mediterranean landscape in the background, but it's this list of rules. And he told me in the original, when he was thinking about what to do with this canvas, he was going to have the speech bubble, not just be a square, but come down all the way here, just listing more rules. So, and there are a lot of rules in Judaism. There's a lot of rules in lots of religion. And instructions to Aaron, again, there's a lot of rules. We have, God speaking from the heavens versus the pointer that shows us, someone speaking here at the table. But, you need to do this for the Holy Temple, or you need to do this for this. And that's what he's playing with. And none of this is really, this is not embedded in the images by Marian. The Marian images are embedded in a Bible. And they're beautiful. I just saw one for sale recently with color plates and like online. And the dealer was, selling it for quite a hefty sum. Because why is biblical art made? Not to, tease us or, as in the modern period, but biblical art is made for the church. Let's say, in front of a church so that we were, to help us of different ways of laying down paint and conveying what he wants to convey, which also creates different kind of interpretations. And Noah, so it's from Noah and the flood, and Noah puts animals on an ark, and they, because God has decreed a flood. And here we're supposed to get a sense of like the driving rain. And in doing so, we have two interesting sort of deviations. One, it's again a lighter kind of laying down of paint like Jephthah's daughter, but look at how the paint kind of dribbles down the front of this canvas. This is some of it's actual dripping, and some of it is markings right here. And then the speech bubble is not a speech bubble. It's more of like a narrative text, which you do find in comics too. They're not usually round, they're like rectangular, in which they have information. But this round shape, I think, is more interesting because it sort of is, conveying the sense of like a sun. There is no sun here, but there is a sense of the sun. So it's just giving you the information. There was a flood on earth for 40 days, and Noah and a few others were survivors, is what it says. Again, this is very thinly painted. It is, you can see the canvas. You can absolutely see the canvas. And then depending on, the show, so I curated a show of 60 paintings from the Bible, which is how I got involved with Archie. And when you make a show, you can hang a show anyway, in any fashion. And in this case, I hung it, like chronologically as the biblical text goes, because I thought that would be the most interesting way for viewers to get a sense of how the biblical text kind of unfolds over time. But you can hang things thematically, or you could hang things stylistically too. But in any case, the Noah was next to some other brighter canvases, so it really popped because it stood out. Jonah, the story of Jonah and the whale, in which Jonah doesn't sort of live up to his promise and ends up on a boat. God gets angry, as God seems to do a lot, and creates a storm. Then Jonah's thrown overboard. God, not entirely wrathful, has a whale swallow him up and spit him onto the ground. This is the most comic book feel of all of these, with the heavy outlines and the exaggerated whale, and look at the tail, and then that landscape. And then we just get, a sense of the story from the narrative, the speech bubble, which, is right there in the center of the canvas. So I also like to pay attention. Where is the speech bubble? Is it on the top? Is it in the middle? How does it intrude? And I'm not saying that in a bad way. Just how is it making conversation with the larger conversation? This is Isaiah Asks God, and Elisha Watches Elijah Depart. These are also two stories that perhaps you're not as familiar with. I think I like these quite a bit because they're about doubt and wondering, and what is the limits of faith, and how do we have faith? So in the case of Elisha Watches Elijah Depart, let's start with that one. Some canvases like these are cynical about religion and maybe even sometimes snarky. So in Elisha Watches Elijah Depart, which is one of my favorites, it portrays the moment where Elijah passes the baton to his successor. So Elijah is leaving the world in this chariot that you can see it radiates a lot of yellow. A seated Elisha, he's rooted to the earth on the left side of the canvas here. And he's charged with the formidable task, like you're going to be a prophet and you need to relay God's words. So the biblical text, I always like to come back to the biblical text so you can see how different what Archie's doing. The biblical text explains that Elisha asks for the faith that Elijah possesses. We're in 2 Kings. He says, this is the Bible, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. That's a biblical text. But playing with words, Archie's uncertain Elisha requests, as if he's sitting on a bar stool, can I have a double portion of your spirit? So a strong drink to calm the nerves may be the best way for Elisha to blindly follow God's directives. And we have another sort of cynical and snarky about religion. Isaiah's asking God, like, Lord, how long? Like, how long do I have to wait for thee? Or how long? It's just, and I think some people feel that way to this day, but Archie just visualizes it and plays on it. And how am I doing on time? All right, so David and Bathsheba. In this case, he shows sort of like David lusts for Bathsheba, and we see that lust, he's enveloped in red up top here in the image, and he's looking at Bathsheba bathing. And we get a sense of like his hot desire for her, and this was not a union that was supposed to happen. And then here, and Archie's not going to skirt the more challenging or sexual or lurid aspects of the biblical text. And Amnon here, and Tamar, she's saying, "Are you nuts? You're my brother. Don't rape me." So, and this is not language that we have in the Bible. And I'm giving a trigger warning for a moment, not for the black slide. Because Archie is willing to, this is not even the strongest language that he uses, but in the case of Joseph and Potiphar's wife, Joseph is pursued by Potiphar's wife, and in the Bible, she wants to be with him, and she says, lieth with me. Those are the words. But in Archie's version, we see a Murillo from the Spanish work on the right from the 17th century, very traditional. But in Archie's, she says something different. And we have like the hot lust of the bedroom, and she ends up just with his cloak, but on the right side of the canvas. But then on the left side, it's very like it's barely painted. It's just an outline. You can see the actual grain of the canvas. That's the safer space, right? He uses color to also convey a safer space. Alan, 5 more minutes? Okay. I just want to mention again that, the comics are very much a Jewish medium, and to mention why, because comics were not a well-respected medium at all. And Jews couldn't get jobs in other kinds of fields. And so they got jobs in the comics industry, which was like considered a joke, and it wasn't real, and it wasn't really art. And so Jews, got in that way. And Superman, as I said, was invented by 2 teenagers in Cleveland. Or Captain America was created by Jews, specifically to fight Nazis. And there we see on the first issue, we have Cap punching out, giving a sock to the jaw to Hitler. Or even in the Fantastic Four, the Thing is sort of a metaphor for Judaism, looking different or feeling different about oneself. And in fact, Jack Kirby made this really interesting drawing for his home space, his personal space of the Thing reading a prayer book. And I think one of Archie's largest influences is Will Eisner, who was a major artist and ultimately created the first graphic novel. And so Archie had many conversations with Eisner. This is A Contract with God. It's considered the first graphic novel. And as you all know, graphic novels are the thing. They have been. We have like a whole floor of graphic novels at my university now. And I always like to recommend that to nod to Art Spiegelman's Mouse. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It's a graphic novel about his dad's Holocaust experience, as well as Spiegelman's experience of being the child of Holocaust survivors. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. But in my last few minutes, I want to just show you some kind of interesting images. So in the beginning, Archie contacted me and said, wouldn't it be fun to do a show together? And I said, well, you have a gigantic body of work. I'm not sure what to do. And he said, come visit. So I went to Brooklyn to visit, and I said, I'm kind of interested in 60 paintings from the Bible. Pull out a few to show me. So I get to his place. This is his living room. And he pulls out one. And I'm like, oh, I love that painting. Maybe I'll see more at some point. He starts, this is him pulling out 60 paintings from the Bible. We have Solomon on the piano up there and other images. So this was pretty incredible, I have to say. But he never had space to really show it. So he would hang it in his warehouse. So here's how some of them look all together. Not as crazy as throwing them on the couch in the living room in the armchair. So this is how they were hung together. They were hung together in '96, but they hadn't been shown together again until 2016. So this is just a few installation views of my show. And because we have a very generous gallery at Cleveland State, I could give them a lot of breathing space. You can see how they're hung and how they look all together. Archie said he sort of envisioned this series as an interconnected mural. So they're supposed to all be hung together. They're not supposed to be separate. So he has them all still. Like, he never gave them to museums or sold them. They're a set. They go together or they stay together. And you can see when you have a gallery, you have movable walls. This wall right here is, we put the Joseph and Potiphar's wife on the other side of this wall, just in case somebody didn't want their children to see it or be exposed to it. You can see two children there examining it. They're mine. And this is what they live with. They know all about this stuff. And then, for example, when you have a different kind of space, this is in Pittsburgh at the American Jewish Museum the following year, and there wasn't as much space, so it was hung differently. It was stacked. I went to the Skirball Museum in Cincinnati, and you can see they have much lower ceilings, but they were hung a little closer to each other, but also, wrapped around this space. It's not easy planning a show. And in this case, the Skirball show, because the walls were all over the place, we made, a little sort of diagram and map. And I was taking my little tiny 60 paintings from the Bible and sticking them up and trying to figure out how they would hang and what direction we should walk. So let me just finish by skipping that and saying that Archie keeps painting and painting. This is his studio. It's magnificent. This is the basement of his warehouse that he lives in Brooklyn. And you can see he has lots of paints, lots of works everywhere. This is storage for his series, the 613. He has a series called the 613, 613 paintings, one for each commandment. So Jews are supposed to follow 613 mitzvot or commandments. Some of them are outdated, they don't work anymore. But Archie wanted to make one canvas for each. That's Archie. He doesn't go out without his perfectly matched suit and fedora, and this is we're into this old-fashioned phone. These are the commandments. These are the things we're supposed to do. They're all numbered, and they are very esoteric interpretations of the commandments. This is the best panoramic view I could get. This was at Rochester, at the Memorial Art Gallery there. It's part of the university. And this isn't even all of them. And you can see they're hung like a mural. They're little, right? They're tiny little things, but you're overwhelmed by the scale. So there's more this way and there was some more on the other side. I happened to be in this picture, but this just was a good view to get a sense of what they look like. I think I have used up my time. So if you have any questions, I'm glad to take them. This is Archie. He's a great guy, a great character. And if you have questions, I'm here.
Is it hard to paint that type of impressionism style?
So if you're an artist, it'd be hard for me. Yes, I cannot, I can barely make a stick figure. But for Archie, so it's Impressionism, and there's some amazing examples of Impressionism out in the museum. I saw a Monet on the wall, which is fantastic to have in the collection. This is like an expressionistic kind of brushstroke, a really fast brushstroke. And that's just his brushstroke. So for him, it's natural, right? This is how he's been trained. This is what he uses. I think I'm not an artist, but like the really tight brushstrokes, and I'm going through the full collection tomorrow. I'm sure there's lots of examples of paintings with really tight brushstrokes. That seems pretty difficult to me.
Mhm.
Thanks very much for your talk. 60 is a lot, but there are a lot of stories in the Bible. So I wondered if you got a sense in looking at these, if there was a sense of kind of thematic unity, like why these stories and not others, and if you wanted to say anything about that.
Well, because I have a friendship and working relationship with Archie, of course, that's one of the questions that I asked. Like, why these and not others? So he says to me, well, not the Christian Bible, because I'm not interested in the Christian Bible. Fine. So it's the stories that speak to him either in subject, or he feels like stylistically he can do something with them, or it's just the language that interests him. So he might come at it from subject. He might come at it from like, what can I do with this artistically? Or it's just about language. And in the end, comics are a marriage of text and image. And so any of those elements can draw him to a certain subject. Now, let me just say that he's made lots of this is just 60 paintings from the Bible across the board based on Marion's engravings. He has an Esther series and an Elijah series. Like, he's basically done everything. He's got a Judith series. The Judith series he paints her as a pinup girl. Let's see if I have one. Hold on. I do not seem to have a Judith today. But his Judith series, and those are 8 by 10, so real small. So we have a show that's going to Jerusalem in November. I said, it's a biennale. It has to be a recent show in the last year. I need something on some Jewish women. He said, I've done everything. There's nothing left. You're right. Well, we sort of figured something out, but he has an Esther series, you name it, he's done it. This just happened to be his interest at the time.
Thank you so much for your great talk. I'm curious if Mr. Rand had formal art training, possibly in New York, or is he a self-taught artist?
Archie has had much training. So he's a child prodigy. He finished high school when he was 14. He went to different art schools, but he studied in particular with Larry Koons, he's got to be maybe close to 100 now, a pretty well-known abstract artist in his day. And so Archie has had much training, much schooling. He's an art professor. He was the chair of the Columbia University art program for a long time. And I was trying how to gently say this. He maybe got fed up with the politics of his institution, and he's the presidential professor of painting at Brooklyn College now. So if I asked him to, and I said, make me something that looks like Masaccio, he could. This is just the medium and the style by which he feels most comfortable.
So I presume he's a native Brooklynite?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
He is very New York.
Okay.
He's born and raised in Brooklyn. He has, he bought this like city block to have his warehouse in, and he is still there. He will always be there.
So the other thing that I'd like to say is that when I saw this first painting at the beginning of your presentation, I just immediately thought of Fauvism, this use of color.
So for those of you who are not familiar, Fauvism is a major movement in Europe, early 1900s. Henri Matisse might be an artist you've heard of. Matisse made The Joy of Life. So the Fauves, they got this sort of like disparaging name, Fauves, because of their raucous use of color. And he's very, he knows art history. And you can have an art history conversation with him any day. So German Expressionism, I think a little bit more, which uses those kinds of also colors like the Kirchner that I showed. But he's also interested in the Fauves. I mean, he likes to have a conversation about art. His artist, like sort of an artist mentor who was very influential on him, is Philip Guston. So I don't know if there's a Guston here or not, but Guston has recently been kind of the subject of some controversy because of his art. But Guston was an abstract expressionist who ultimately returned to figuration and with a sort of comic book sense to his art. You can look it up if you'd like, Guston, Guston, for any of you who are interested in seeing his work.
Well, I'm sorry. Melissa, do you have a question? Let's make this the last question. Professor Melissa Stockdale.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. It seems like whenever you venture into interpreting or depicting religious stories, that there are going to be people who are highly offended or perhaps even want you to stop doing it. Has he had any problems with the way that he has chosen to represent important stories from the Old Testament?
Okay, so Archie and controversy is the question. And so in these cases, no. However, he was commissioned to image a synagogue in Brooklyn, a Sephardic synagogue, B'nai Yosef, and it's like 10,000 square feet of wall space. There's a movie about it called The Painted Shul, like a documentary, and it's on YouTube or one of those online channels. He's interviewed, you get to see it. He decorated it from floor to ceiling in some of it's abstract expressionist. Some of it is like trompe l'oeil, like makes it look like it's the Western Wall. Some of it looks like this, and it became a huge thing. That can you have representational art? What is he doing? And so forth. And it had to go through to a Beit Din, and he was like convicted for heresy. Like it was a whole thing, and because this was a more observant synagogue. So if you want to learn about that, was his biggest controversy, and that was a big deal. So that was in the cover, and this was a long time ago, a few decades ago. So that would be the biggest controversy. Other than that, these people either come to see this art or they don't, right? You can come to the gallery, you cannot come to the gallery.
Let me thank Professor Samantha Baskind for coming here from Cleveland, for teaching our class this morning, and for giving such a wonderful next lecture just now. Thank you, Samantha. That was
my pleasure.
wonderful.
Thank you.